So I put together a couple of tips. These are pieces of advice that I received in my own open source journey. And so I'll kind of take you through some of the stories, some of the experiences that I had. And these are just things that I think will help out anyone looking to get started. So the first step is to just identify your inspiration. A lot of you may already have this step down because that's probably why you're here. But for me, it was being really involved in, being really interested in getting started with Spark. I loved Scala. The functional paradigm was something that was very new to me, and I was really excited about it. That's what ultimately made me want to see a bit more about what was under the covers and get involved in contributing. So this could be anything. This could be someone you met or a language that you like. Once you know what you're excited about, where you want to get involved, then it's time to survey your motivation. What do you want to get out of this experience? Is this something that you want to, do you want to further your career? Do you want to learn a new language? Anything, kind of try and understand your ultimate goal for doing this. And what some of the other things, fame and fortune, it's definitely possible, eternal happiness. You can certainly accomplish those through open source. Fountain of Youth is more of an ambitious goal. I wouldn't recommend having that kind of motivation. Pretty unrealistic, but job security for sure. And it really helped me improve my core engineering skills. It gave me a lot of practice in areas that I didn't get during my day job. And I learned a lot about release management, project management, and just how to communicate with each other within a project, both internally and externally. How do you communicate with your users or with people who want to get involved with your project? There are a lot of benefits for it, but you should be aware of what that motivation is. That way you can take concrete steps to work towards that goal. The other thing that was really helpful is making friends in the space. So finding people working on projects that I found interesting, not necessarily the project that I wanted to contribute to, but going to conferences, going to meetups, and meeting people who could give me advice. Some of these people, all of these are friends of mine. Some of them are now such good friends that we go out for drinks, and all of that sort of after-hours interaction has been one of the most game-changing things for me, because I get to hear their stories, and I won't name names, but there's a certain picture up there. I don't think he's here, but he really loves to tell stories, and they've given me such a good window into how certain projects function. And I think that I really underestimated the value of having friends in the space, because after hours, I've gotten incredibly good advice. And everyone needs a Rob. So Rob is at the bottom left side of the slide. You may recognize all the other pictures, but you might not recognize Rob's. He is one of my favorite people ever, and he's the one who first introduced me to some of these people on accident, and most of them I have to thank for him. He's a connector. He's not an engineer, he's just a friend, and he happens to know really interesting people. So if you know anyone like Rob, ask them for introductions, ask them to introduce you to people that you think might help you out. Anyone involved in an open source project is really valuable. The other thing is not just making friends, but also meeting people that you really admire. This could be a speaker that you've heard at a conference or one of the founders of one of the projects that you're interested in. It can be a bit difficult to get one-on-one time with them, but you can always find them at a conference, stop them in the hallway, shake their hand, introduce yourself, and just thank them for speaking, for their book that you read. Ask them good questions, and they will enjoy talking to you. Everyone likes to sort of get deep into the weeds about what they're passionate about, and famous people are no exceptions. The other thing that I really like is being a track host. So at O'Reilly, there was someone who gave me an introduction, and I did that for the first time at Strata this year. I didn't really expect it to be such a great experience, but it was because I got to meet all the speakers on my track for the day. So even though my motivation was to be able to go to the conference and attend the sessions, the experience of standing up, 5 times in quick succession throughout a single day was actually very good practice, and it made me meet people that I may not have otherwise had the courage to go up and introduce myself to. So I highly recommend that. Talk to someone from O'Reilly. They're always looking for help. That was really key for me. And also, get up and speak. Being a speaker is really, it's difficult. I won't downplay how difficult it is, but that has given me things to talk about to other speakers, to other really interesting people, and it's very rewarding. Everyone knows something, and everyone can talk about what they're passionate about. Also, don't be afraid to ask for introductions. If you meet one person that can introduce you to someone else, just ask, because usually people are pretty happy to do that. Don't skip the happy hour, a lesson I will never forget, because as a result, I ended up at a startup in New York, which was basically my dream job. I won't go into that story, but just be social, go to conferences, and talk to people outside of sessions. Don't just sit in them and listen. Also, really important, make sure you get a selfie, because these pictures are some of the most motivating things that I own. They're some of my most valuable possessions. It reminds me of the time I got to ask the question. Anyway, take a selfie. You'll thank yourself for it later. It's kind of embarrassing, but it's good. So once you know what project you want to get involved in, and you have some help, you have a team behind you, it's time to start observing. So go into these forums. You don't have to jump in and start writing code, but go into wherever that communication is happening. That could be in Jira. Take a look at the tickets, do some filtering, try and look at what tickets were resolved previously and how long did that take. Look at sort of the big chunks. Try and get a feel for the history of that project and the cadence at which they resolve tickets at. And for sure, join the dev mailing list, because there is a ton of good stuff on there. And that is all archived publicly, so it's not like you have to join and then wait. You can go back through those archives and see how the community communicates with one another. And that's kind of important for just identifying where the different sort of sections of that community exist. There's usually little subgroups within a community, and that can tell you a lot. And also, it's really important to see how respectful people are with each other. Are discussions collaborative? Do they result in actual code pushes, or do people generally bring others down? There are some things that you want to watch out for, and so before you get involved in a community, that can really tell you a lot about it. And learn from other people's mistakes. I've seen some interesting things on dev mailing lists where someone may come in and make a very controversial comment, and seeing the backlash of that, okay, that's the kind of comment that I should never make in the future. Things like that are really valuable. And also pay attention to, there's tire fires in every project, and when they break out, they usually break out in a big way. And how do they handle that? How is that frequent? How is the project maintained? Where do those tire fires come from? Is it a result of, is it a user problem? Is it some sort of underlying architectural problem? That could indicate, one, where to start if you do end up working on that project, but that will give you a good idea of how they operate day to day. This will also tell you what pushes people's buttons. Every community is different. There are things that they're extra sensitive to, and you can see that in the dev mailing list. So that can help you not push people's buttons when you're brand new and first getting into the project. And also, how inclusive is the environment? Not just how many women are involved, but how diverse is that code base? I've been in engineering for over a decade. I'm used to being the only woman around, but it's always nicer to have another one there. And I know that if I'm walking into a new environment, if there's already a woman in place and I see that the men interact with her with respect, it makes me a lot more likely to want to join the community. So again, if you're in a community already and you're looking to add women, be respectful, and that is really one of the strongest indicators to get women to join your project. So how productive are these discussions? When someone does raise an issue, people have different ideas of how things should be done, different ideas of how code should be designed. How are those approached? Are they constructive or not? We can all recognize the difference. Yeah, so do some lurking. You don't have to say a thing, but get a feel for your community before you just dive in, and that can give you at least a heads up as to what you're getting yourself into. So if you're comfortable with the community, you know that you're excited about it, you like the people who are in it, you think that you can be productive there, then it's time to be proactive. So go digging through the Jira, look for some tickets that you think you can tackle, something in your strength area. A good way to find some is to filter by. A lot of projects have a starter label, so filter for unresolved issues with a starter tag, and that will at least get you to dip your toes in to see if you like it. But essentially just grab something and start working on it. And if you come across something that you don't know how to resolve, go learn it. There's a ton of tutorials out there, especially if it's a technical challenge. It's a great way for you to improve your skills. That's kind of the point of getting involved in a project, is learning new things. And just dive in, do it, get your hands dirty. That's the best way. And if you get stuck, what happens if you get stuck? You can always go to the dev list. If it's project specific, people in the project will likely have a really good solution for you, and maybe something that you would have spent an hour or two digging to resolve, they may have a good answer for you. If it's specific to the particular problem that you're working on and it's less of a generic problem, just comment on the ticket and ask someone if they can help you with that particular problem. You can ask some of your new friends, the ones that you're having wine with after work now. They can help out, and even if they don't know anything about the particular project you're working on, they will always have advice for you from a broader perspective, especially in the arena of communicating with other people in the community, especially more of the broader question. And if it's something that's pretty common, then go find a video. If you don't happen to be at a conference and you can't ask anyone famous in person, they've probably given a video on it. And canned answers can be really useful too. If you're having that problem, a lot of other people probably have as well. So there's plenty of resources out there. So this brings me to the most important slide of today. If you remember nothing else that I say, I want you to remember this. This is the most important rule, and that's to be confident. This is a tweet, the graphic is a tweet that I posted after this huge aha moment. It was right after I saw my code merged into the Apache Spark project for the first time, and I was so happy. It was incredible. I couldn't believe it. I was super proud of myself, and that felt kind of weird because the PR that I submitted was kind of silly Python code. It was nothing big. I've written much more complicated code than that. So why was I so happy to see that go in? I was so happy because it had nothing to do with my ability. I could have done this a long time ago, but for some reason, I thought that I was scared to do it because I didn't think that I could do it. And at the end, when I realized, okay, my code is valuable, I do have the skills to do this, and it didn't really take me that long. I didn't have to look up very many things, maybe a bit of syntax. That was when I realized that it was all about confidence, and confidence was what had held me back this entire time. That was enlightening for me. I had no idea. So, along those lines, don't take shit from anyone. If anyone tries to tell you that you're not good enough or tries to put down your code, if you're confident in it, stand up for yourself and defend yourself and put it out there anyway. Put yourself out there, be vulnerable. You have the ability. It has nothing to do with ability. It's all about confidence. Obviously, don't be a jerk about that. Let's all be cool, right? We don't want to contribute to any poisoned environments. Everyone, be positive about it, but stand up for yourself and just get out there and do it. And someone gave me this advice. This is not coming from me. I had to hear this from someone, and that was ultimately what made me get out there and do it. Just hearing, don't take shit from anyone and just get out there and do it. That is really important. Also, don't let your boss stop you. There was zero support at the company I worked for. It was very much discouraged. It was a very traditional 100-year-old company, no open source anywhere in the place. And I did all of this on my own time, under my own name, on my own equipment. It wasn't even really related to my role as an engineer. It was completely separate. There was no chance of any IP leaking out. It was completely separate. That didn't stop my company from being a bit disapproving about it, and just screw it, like do it anyway, because this is you building your own brand. This is in your name, it's not in the company's name, and your code contribution belongs to you, not to anyone else. So don't worry if anyone is not supportive, just do it anyway. So this is a picture. We're talking about confidence, right? Let's talk about that a little bit more. This is the morning of the day I rode my first century. The century, if you're not a cyclist, is riding 100 miles in a single day. This was taken in Lone Pine, California, and we headed out that day to Furnace Creek, which is in the middle of Death Valley. It's 104 miles away, and I was with this team of incredibly energetic people. So they're so energetic and so convincing that they completely peer pressured me into going on this trip, and I was completely unprepared for it. I am not a cyclist. I still say I'm not a cyclist. I had zero experience. I had had a bike for, I don't know, like a month before that, and I hadn't done I had zero fitness for the 3 years prior to this. I was in really bad shape. And they convinced me to do it originally because I was going to drive the support vehicle. That seemed like a thing I could do. That didn't seem too ambitious. But somehow that turned into, oh no, Michelle, you could totally do this entire ride. Don't worry about it. Just try. Just start out in the morning and keep trying. So I let them convince me to bring my bike along and just start out until I hit my wall. And as soon as I did hit my wall, I could always just ride in the vehicle with the photographer. No big deal. But at least I would be trying. I knew before I started out on this journey that there was no way. There was absolutely no way that I would ever make it. The larger trip was from San Francisco to Las Vegas, which is 700 miles over 8 days. There was no way that I was ever going to do that as an inexperienced cyclist. So this particular day, we started out, and it involved, 3 or 4 hours of continuous uphill climbing, in parts at like 12% grade. It was incredibly difficult, one of the hardest things that I've ever done. But I wasn't alone. I had friends with me. I had friends in the domain. Even though I didn't know anything about cycling, they would put things into my hand. Michelle, drink this. Hydrate, eat now, eat half this Cliff Bar. Don't forget your salt tablets, take this. I had people to help me. That's why friends are so important. Having a team is really critical. I was never by myself. I always had someone cycling next to me, even when I was like screaming and just, oh, this is awful. Always had someone to cheer me on and make sure that I didn't give up. So this day was a pretty long day. This is what it looked like. We went from Lone Pine into Furnace Creek, 100 miles, 6,000 vertical feet of climbing, 8 hours of just cycling. That doesn't include breaks or lunch or anything. We started out first thing in the morning, and we ended long after dark. If you've ever been to Death Valley, you'll know that there are no lights. It was really dark. But we made it, and the point is, I knew without a shadow of a doubt before I went on that trip that I couldn't do it. I knew it. But clearly, that boundary was artificial. And I think we do that to ourselves all the time. We set boundaries that we know are real, that we know are there. And we can surprise ourselves. So really, this is just to say, get out there and do it, because what you think you can't do might not even be true. So, So the larger trip, so just to kind of complete that story, the larger trip was, again, from San Francisco all the way to Las Vegas with 5 others. And Accomplishing a century on that trip was hard enough, but doing the entire trip from going across Yosemite and down through Death Valley and ending up in Vegas was one of the most difficult things that I've ever done. And at the end of that trip, walking through the airport in Las Vegas, heading back home was very confidence building. So I say this because I never expected this to cross over into my professional life or into my engineering life. But building confidence by doing something else, there's a higher lesson there, right? About boundaries that don't exist. So my advice is to build confidence in however way you can. Whatever opportunity shows up, take it with the goal of building confidence, because that's been the #1 most helpful thing for me. And then this is kind of a like lagniappe surprise extra #9. But once you do accomplish something great, you should celebrate it. I really have a thing for cakes. This was the one that I had when I did my first contribution. It was a while ago, I don't know, a year and a half ago. But I think the cool thing about this cake is that it's a Spark cake, and it's not just a regular cake. It's a cupcake cake. It's distributed, just like Spark. Take the time to celebrate your accomplishments and be proud of yourself, because it's something that you thought you could never do. It's actually very possible. And just because I really like cakes, there have been some other cakes in my life. Geeky cakes, machine learning cakes, you name it. So just to kind of wrap things up, these are some of the pieces of advice that I was given along the way. And it's been an interesting journey for sure, but I'm in a much better place because of it. It was tough. I had to really get out of my comfort zone a lot. I had to put myself out there, but I made a lot of really great friends along the way, and I found a new job as a result of it, as a data science engineer working in natural language processing, which is my dream job. It's pretty great. And that never would have happened if I didn't have code to show. Everything that I had written before was for a company. So all of the work from the past decade was locked inside a private repository of someone that I couldn't just go to a job interview with. But because I was making open source contributions, and even now, every interview that I go to, they always want to see my code. This is the absolute best way to show that what you do matters, that you have the skills to contribute to a meaningful project. So get inspired, figure out what your motivation is, make sure you make friends along the way. That's really key. Teams are important. If you can, meet someone you admire. Don't underestimate the value of having that selfie pinned to your desk. It's really important. And just observe. Take some time to get a feel for your community before you join it. Be proactive. Just get in there and do it. Don't take shit from anyone. Ask for help whenever you need it. And above all, be confident. So if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to go into a bit more detail. Please use the mic.
Thank you very much. This has been the best presentation of the day. That's all I want to say.
Thank you. That's great to hear. Anyone want to know how tired I was after that century? I could not keep my eyes open. I was literally leaning on a pole, like holding it to keep myself from falling over. It was tough. Can you use the mic, please?
My question is, where do you go looking for the projects that you could contribute to?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I started with just something that I was interested in, which was distributed computing, functional programming. And from there, that can narrow things down for you. You know, in the distributed space, there are a few big ones. There are some smaller ones. As you make friends, they tell you about projects that maybe they're working on or that they've heard of. Conferences are a great place because people sometimes present some of the code that they've just open sourced, or just meeting people at happy hours, you hear about these things. So I would say take that thing that you're really interested in, whether that's a language or a paradigm, whatever, and go from there. Use that. That's at least, if you like a language, that's at least a filter for projects that use that language.
So when you started your first contribution, what were some of the challenges you had to go through to understand the existing code?
Yeah, that was in my lurking stage. That was in looking through the code base. And I didn't mention the code base, but that's a very good point. Spark is a huge project, and there are a ton of different components within it. And to get started, I wouldn't recommend going in and digging through all of that. I started with project infrastructure, which is a bit separate. It had to do with the release process, and it was a much smaller bite to take off. So I would say, you know, before you get into the weeds, because that can be really daunting, understand the higher level objectives of the project, understand the larger concepts, and then find something with that starter tag. Find something in an area that you maybe already know something about. But you can just essentially like download the code locally and just start looking through it. I mean, that's what I did once I was ready to tackle some of the larger problems. Okay, if no one has any questions, thank you very much.